G'day, welcome back. I just finished recording a podcast episode with Greg McMillan from the iPhoneography podcast network. Very cool. Had a great time. Greg's an amazing guy and shared some really valuable insights. I had some technical issues. So what I've done is I've put together a highlights video to share with you. And because one of the iPads was uploading a heap of videos onto the cloud at the same time. So I had a lot of lag. But hopefully what I've been able to recover will provide some real value for you. So without further ado, we'll get straight into it. I have my very first guest with me today that I'm really excited to have. It's Greg McMillan from the iPhoneography podcast network. Greg, just for everybody who hasn't already subscribed to your podcast, which I find difficult to believe because there's not many actually iPhone or Android smartphone dedicated podcasts out there. So for those that haven't heard of you, don't know who you are, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I work in the printing industry by trade, and I've been doing that for well over 30 years. I got an early start in photography when I was a teenager, and with just a little film camera that I use now and again. And I really didn't get serious about photography until my, I guess, early 20s when I was able to buy myself an SLR camera. Now that's back in the film days. And, fast forward into the digital era, I had a digital SLR or DSLR and, enjoyed that for a few years. And then, smartphones started adding cameras in them. And when they first started, of course, they were just like, you'd be lucky if it was a megapixel, for the sensor size. So the pictures were just for nonchalantly taking a snap now and again. And eventually, they started getting a little bit better. And then when the iPhone came out, they got better again. And then what really did it for me was seeing a picture from a friend of mine of his daughter's dog. And I asked him, he was a big Canon user and I was too. So I said, "Oh, which camera did you take that with?" Because he had a couple of different Canons. And he said, "Oh, that was with my iPhone." And my jaw dropped. And, it was an iPhone 4 at the time. And that's when they really started to improve the camera systems. So at that time I was a big BlackBerry fan because their headquarters is like a couple of hours away from me here in Canada. And I was, kind of anti-Apple back then just because of their closed ecosystem. I didn't think it was right. But since then I've started paying more attention to what their products were like and, listening to podcasts about them and things like that. And I get it now. I get it why, Steve Jobs did what he did with their ecosystem. So, when the iPhone 4S came out, that's when I made my jump to Apple and got the iPhone 4S. And the camera in it was really, really amazing compared to what I've been using. And, just over the years now, I've just progressed through the different iPhones. I didn't get one every year. I was on the S cycle, I call it, where, there was a 4S, then the 5 came out the next year. I didn't get that. Then the 5S came out, and I went to the 5S, 6S. And then when the 7, what should have been the 7S, it was actually the 8 Plus, and the 10. They all come out at the same time. So then I got the 8 Plus. That's the one I got that year. Then went to the 10S Max, and now I'm on the 12 Pro Max. And this thing, it's just absolutely amazing. And of course, I've got my Struman case on there. Never go home, never leave without it. And
Yeah.
but so it's been a steady progression over the years. But in 2016, I came to the realization that I was using my iPhone more than I was my traditional camera. So I sold all my DSLR stuff, and I've been shooting strictly with iPhone ever since, and love it. Just never turn back.
Yeah.
So,
Fantastic.
so now as far as podcasting goes, I was looking for something. Like, I was always listening to podcasts about technology and stuff, and I wanted, well, there's got to be one there about iPhone, like mobile photography or iPhone photography or something. So I just did a search on the podcast app on my phone, and Tiny Shutter was the only one that came up. So I started listening and became a fan instantly. And back then, they had when they broadcast or when they recorded, they actually broadcasted live on Mixler, which is a website you can go to and listen live, and they had a little chat room.
Right.
So of course I'm in there like a dirty shirt, and I'm typing away with stuff. And if they responded, I'm thinking, oh, this is they answered me. You know, these guys were rock stars to me. And eventually they said, well, why don't you come on as a guest? So I thought, oh, that was awesome. So I did, and you know, then another guest appearance, and I think maybe another one after that. I'm not sure, but then they asked me if I wanted to come on as a co-host, and I was just floored. I thought that was awesome, and that's how I got my start in podcasting.
Yeah,
So
fantastic.
it's just been a fun ride.
Yeah, and they're still going. They're still just an episode here and there, but I think they did 9 years solid, which is
It's
incredible.
yeah, they I don't know if I wouldn't say they got burned out per se, but
Mm.
um so okay, so there's Mark Sadowski. He was the co-founder of Tiny Shutter. The other guy that co-founded it with him, he's just years ago kind of gone off and did his own thing. But and then Joseph Ferreira. Well, actually, Matt Hoffman came in almost right from the beginning, and then there was Joseph Ferreira, and then Dave Podner, and then myself. So eventually, there was five of us. Where Mark kind of stepped back a little bit. He's a wedding photographer, so he didn't have a lot of time to put into coming on regularly, and that was okay. He'd come on once in a while, and uh, so Dave Podner and myself. So as you know, Dave is my co-host on the iPhoneography podcast. Well, him and I, my son's grown up and gone. He's like 31 years old and he's on his own. And Dave doesn't have any children, but he has pets. So those are his kids. But the other guys have young children, and they were finding it a little difficult to, dedicate to going online and doing a podcast every week. And then it was down to every 2 weeks. And then, eventually they just kind of pulled back. And then when Mark decided to stop regular production of the show, I'm not going to say it's gone, but he did stop doing regular production. And so then on the last show that they did on a normal schedule, he said, well, why don't you take the reins and talk about iPhone photography on your show? And I said, okay. And then that's when I changed it from what it used to be was the Artful iPhoneography interviews. And that was because I have a community on MeWe called the Artful iPhoneography Community. And it was a companion to that community where I would interview people from the community and just put out a podcast that way. So then now it's kind of evolved into the iPhoneography podcast where I talk about everything. Basically everything they did on Tiny Shutter is now done on my show.
Yeah.
And it's just been going ever since. So
yeah, and you
it's a
brought
lot
in
of fun. I love
David.
it. Yes. So there's Dave Podner, and then there's David Addison.
Yeah.
So Dave and I had David on as a guest because he's got a YouTube channel and he talks about iPhone photography and all aspects of it. Does a lot of reviews and stuff.
Yep.
And so after we finished recording, of course, we're kind of just chatting for a little bit before we sign off. And he said that he'd like to try doing a podcast. And I said, well, you should go for it. And so I think it was a few days later, he actually had the idea, and I'm glad he did, but he had the idea of doing his own show, but under the iPhoneography podcast banner.
Yeah.
So it would go on my channel. The YouTube videos that he does for the podcast would go on my channel, and that's what we're doing. So now he has the David Addison show, and and it's brilliant. It's you know, he talks to different people that I would never know to connect with, and that
Yeah.
because you know he was a photographer, traditional photographer, professional photographer before he went and did the YouTube thing, and uh, yeah, so it's a perfect fit for the you know podcast. So I've basically named my channel the iPhoneography Podcast Network, because that way it's basically the two shows under the one network type of thing, and you know we'll just see where that goes.
Yeah, it's
But yeah,
fantastic.
he's a very welcome addition.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I just saw the change to the name, and I'm not sure if you picked up. I introduced as the network. I think that's fantastic. It's like you said, it might open up other
Oh
opportunities.
yeah,
Really exciting. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah. You never know.
oh, and you've got a book. I finished reading your book the other day, and it's on Apple Books. And I had no idea. I don't use Apple Books, and every time I jump in there, I say you've reached your daily goal for today. And so
Oh
I
yeah.
I got through the end of that, and that was fantastic. And I saw a few things in there that you mentioned, and one was when you were introduced to the iPhoneography, the Tiny Shutter podcast, how you won the pick of the week, and I share your excitement when you say in your book that you won that, because I won one of those one week, and I was just so excited, thinking, "Oh, they've chosen me," and and
Yeah.
it's really exciting. I mean, it kind of, as you say in your book, it kind of validates you a little bit. I know we don't like going chasing likes on Instagram and that sort of thing, because, with the
Yeah.
algorithms, they're so swayed towards engagement, whether it's positive or negative engagement. And you and I could talk about Facebook for
Yeah.
quite a long time, I'm sure. But to have your
Yeah.
photos recognised by that group, like you said, they're rock stars, and I put you in the same category. I think that's one of the things that you and I love about this. What we do is the community side of it. So, um, yeah,
Yeah.
can you
Yeah.
explain what you personally get out of photography?
Say again, Mike. Sorry.
Yeah, can you just explain to us what you personally get out of photography, what sort of enjoyment it gives you, and what you get out of it?
Yeah, I think in my mind I've always said I just I love this world that we live in, and I always wanted to um, share with others what I see. So if I take a picture of something, um, like if I capture something, then I want to be able to you know make it look like what I see in my mind's eye with my editing, which isn't much really. I do very subtle edits, and yeah, I just and I'm not in it for the likes and all that stuff. I just I mean, I live in a very very small part of the world, right, where uh, anywhere people that live anywhere else cannot see. So I think it's a very nice part of the world. We have everything from meadows to beaches to shorelines to if I want to drive for a couple of hours, massively big cities. And it's such a diverse area that there's a lot of beauty in it to share with the world. And that's what I like to do. I always figure if one person looks at a picture of mine and if it puts a smile on their face or makes them go, wow, or whatever, then my job's done.
Yeah,
I'm not making any money with my photography. Never really thought about doing that. It's just to me trying to make a living with it, but by selling pictures or whatever. Um, I think it's just too cumbersome for me to want to do that. So
mm,
what I get out of it is just the joy of sharing with the world what I see.
yeah, yeah. And clearly, you also get a lot out of sharing knowledge with people as well, putting together the podcast and that sort of thing. So I'm curious
Yeah,
where,
I've always said it's all about the learning. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'm curious where you think that comes from, that willingness to share, and that because you have such transparency as well. Like you you don't hide anything and you share everything. And I'm just curious, where do you think that comes from, that desire to just help people so much?
I think it's because I've learned so much from other people, and it's that appreciation that I have for that whole concept. You know, I've probably heard this from somebody before. I forget where I heard it. I'm pretty sure I heard it from somebody, but I kind of make it my mantra that, uh, teach what you learn, or teach what you know, and learn what you don't.
Yeah.
And I've always been all about doing that. Like I'm in a local photography club in town here, and have been for 16 years, I think. And you know, it's all about the learning. I've always said that it's all about the learning, because some people come in, they've never held a camera in their hands before, and they want to learn photography, right? Or they want to improve their photography.
Yeah.
And the only way to do that is if somebody helps them. And I mean, people have helped me along the way, so I'm just paying it forward.
Yeah. And in your book, you mentioned when you put together, I think you said 25 different photos from 3 different cameras, the presentation, and you put that to the club and showed them at the end of it. You said,
Yeah.
who still doesn't think mobile photography is photography?
Yeah. And nobody could say anything.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I didn't, that's not to try to be like a slap in the face, or rub anything into anybody. But I will admit that that was a time in for me, but in the mobile space too, I think, where a lot of traditional photographers were still not quite accepting mobile
Mm,
as a form of photography, because, you know, in those days, this was a phone that took pictures. But
yeah.
now, oh, my camera came on. But now it's a camera that makes phone calls. And I think
I love that.
that's quite that's quite a thing, to be able to say that, because um, I just heard the other day that Apple has something like 800 engineers working on their camera system.
Yeah. Wow.
So
That's
that means it's very important to them.
yeah.
And I talk about Apple a lot because that's what I use. I use an iPhone. But I mean, the same would go for, you know, the Android phones like Huawei and Samsung, and all there's so many different ones. And the I love the iPhone. It's because I use it. But I've seen some
Yeah.
absolutely amazing stuff from other phones, So it's
Yeah.
just like, I kind of liken it to um, Canon, Olympus, Nikon, and all that stuff. Like they're all cameras, just with a different name on them. So that's basically what we're looking at with smartphones is, you've got iPhone, you got Samsung, you got Huawei, you know, all these different cameras that make phone calls. That's how I look at it. So
Yeah. And it's really it's so fascinating because I've been working in photography for 25 years now, and a lot of that time I was delivering workshops to professional photographers, trying to squeeze as much as we could out of cameras. And there was always that lens envy and that rivalry between people of what
yeah,
equipment you've got. And David mentioned on his show he talked about how in the smartphone photography world you just don't see that. There's no iPhone versus
yeah.
Samsung. Like we just kind of avoid that. We all kind of feel like we're on a level playing field, don't we?
Yeah, that's right. Like David said, there's no elitism in
Yeah.
mobile photography, and uh, I have seen online where people have gotten into it over the iPhone Android thing, but I think it was more the operating system than it
Right.
was the cameras.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's kind of an argument that I try to stay out of that now.
Yeah.
I used to
Yeah.
get into it a little bit, but I mean, I try to stay out of it now because. Uh, they're both very, very good in their own right, and it just depends on which way you want to go, right? You either
Yeah.
want to go with Android or you want to go with Apple or whatever. Um, so if someone with an Android phone comes to me and needs to help with something, even though I don't own one, I'll do whatever I can to try to go through it and figure it out. Like my dad has an Android phone, and I've tried to sort things out with him sometimes, and so there's no point being one-sided about it all. There's just so many of them out there.
Yeah. And so I asked you to share some photos with us, and you've sent three of them through, which was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all quite reflective of because there's I see, looking at your work and what you share, there seems to be three different main parts of, well, genres and subjects, if you like, of photography.
Mm-hmm.
In landscape, macro, and slow shutter stuff. And that kind of reminds me of an article you shared years ago on LinkedIn about computational photography. And I think that's the exciting area that smartphone photography has been going into for quite some time now. And it's just, as we reach those limitations, and we keep saying that, limitations in hardware, but they keep seeming to be able to...
It's getting harder to say that.
Yeah, so for those that term computational photography is a new term, and it's like, well, what does that mean? Am I using my computer or my phone? What does that mean to you, computational photography? Just explain that quickly.
Well, it's just it's more software processing than it is hardware, where you just have glass and a sensor. Like in traditional photography, you have your camera body and your lens, and the light comes through the lens onto the sensor, and you use your settings in the camera to get the image the way you want. And then, of course, after that, there's almost always post-processing done on a computer or whatever. But with a smartphone, there's so much done before the image is even saved, because there's like, I can speak for the iPhone, not so much for any other phone, but the iPhone, basically when you lift your phone with the camera on, it's already shooting photos.
Yeah.
Because what it's doing is, with each image that you see in your camera roll, there's probably, I don't know, a dozen photos put together to make one, and that happens so fast and so instantly that you just don't realize it. But it's when I say it's shooting photos, it's holding them in a buffer, I guess, because it's processing the light, the scene, everything else, scene detection, things like that are in play. And when you tap the button to take the photo, it then saves what it needs to get the best image possible. And it uses, the best parts of the whole frame to make that one image. So if you've seen like an Apple event where they talk about the cameras and how they work with their image signal processors, it has segmentation, it highlights, shadows, all that stuff are all dissected and put together again to produce that final image. And that is, I mean, in essence, computational photography, because it's using trillions or billions, if not trillions, of computations per second or whatever to put all that data together to make that image. It's not as simple as light coming into the lens and writing the data on the sensor, unless, of course, you're just shooting straight raw, not pro raw, but just straight raw. That's simply image on the light coming in through the glass and onto the sensor. So with computational photography, you've got things like portrait mode, and most smartphones are putting that in their phones now. Apple just released with the 13 series cinematic mode, which is kind of like portrait mode for video. All that stuff is computational. It's mind-blowing how much stuff gets done before you actually see the image. So, I mean, even when you have your camera open and you see the preview on the screen, that's actually video mode type of thing working to show you that. I mean, it's all crazy computational stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and that article that I wrote was basically about the depth information to where you can adjust the focus afterwards. And there's an app called Focus that those guys are just brilliant. Um, they when they brought that app out, you can take a photo with, it's kind of like portrait mode, but you don't have to have a person in it, and you can tap on the screen where you want the focus to be after the fact, and it's just mind-boggling stuff.
Yeah. One of the things I love about Focus app is that you're also not restricted to that distance to the main subject as well. So you can shoot something 5 meters away and tap on it and select them, have them in focus, and create that portrait mode behind them. So yeah, it's one of the things I love about the apps is the way that developers can using extreme math can just create this whole new versatility and capability in an already amazing camera. Yeah, it's really interesting because I used to have this debate all the time with people when they, well, not a debate, but discussion, where people put hashtag no edit. It's like, oh, hang on, even your mirrorless camera goes and edits the photo before you actually see it. But yeah. And when you start playing around with it, going back to the iPhone for a moment with the live view, I love with live photos. But for so long, I kind of just dismissed it, that it's just a gimmick. But for me, with my story with my mum, after before she passed away, we had 6 photos of her over the last 9 years of her life, and one of them, fortunate, is actually a live photo. So I can actually hold that photo and we can hear her voice, and it's the only only record we have of Mum's voice, because over time your memory, it just diminishes, and so. As much as it can be inconvenient, transferring to your computer and you have a photo plus a 3-second video, that live photo is, it's fantastic. Yeah.
It's priceless now. It's priceless.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'll bring up the photos that you sent through. And apologies for my camera. It looks like my camera is frozen again, so we'll just ignore that. But
that's okay.
Having a look at your photo here, as I suggested, there's 3 different topics that you seem to resonate with and capture quite a lot. Is the slow shutter, landscape, and macro. So, what is your looking at this on screen here for those watching YouTube and looking at my frozen face? And for those listening, how would you describe this photo that we've got here?
This photo is the epitome of everything that I love to do in photography. And so what it is for those who can't see it is, okay, so I live on the Niagara Escarpment, which is, it's almost like there's a high part of the land, and it goes almost like a cliff or a rocky thing down to the lower section. And it's not like a cliff or anything. It may only be a difference in elevation of a few meters to a dozen meters or whatever, or maybe a little more, but it just depends on where you are on the Niagara Escarpment. But it runs from the tip of the peninsula that's just north of me all the way down to Niagara Falls. And so Niagara Falls, I mean, I'm sure everybody's heard of that. Niagara Falls is falling over the basically the bottom end of the escarpment. I think my explanation of the escarpment is kind of close, but but so there's anywhere where there's a river that runs across the Niagara Escarpment, you're going to have a waterfall, and we have a few of them around here where I live. And this particular image is actually just downstream from probably the most famous waterfall in our area, which is Inglis Falls. And I went to this location one day. It was kind of cloudy, overcast. That's the kind of day I love to shoot this type of thing. And I ran into a couple of friends that I used to work with. They were out doing the same thing. So it was a great time to get together with them. And we all started taking pictures of the river and that. And so this is kind of in the middle of a forest, really. And the river's just running through it. And there's all kinds of rocks and, fallen logs and things like that. And so I used slow shutter cam for this one, because this was in the summer of 2020, I believe it was. Yeah. And So it was before even longer came out, but that app's another story. It's another brilliant app. But so I took this image and you know I just kind of composed it the way I wanted to have the trees in there and the water and the rocks and everything else, and then just give it a nice you know smooth look on the water. And I mean that's just if I could shoot that kind of content for the rest of my life, I would be happy.
Yeah, yeah.
So
This is what when I started playing around with the smartphone after my extreme prejudice for so many years, I when I discovered that you could do long exposure on the phone, it just blew me away. I could not believe it because it's one of those things that I actually enjoyed about photography is seeing the unseen, as Don Camaracha says in his book.
mhm.
That exploring that world and this sort of thing is yeah, it's just mind boggling that we can do this on a phone. So when it comes to editing your
Yeah, oh
photos,
yeah.
Greg, what's your process for editing? Because I've got your original one here. So this is the original photo up on the screen, and to go from that original, it's quite a transformation. It's just that I mean that by no means does that look like a snapshot. There's still a beautifully composed photo, but to take it from that to that end result, it's just you've just got so much more vibrancy, and it's gone from an excellent shot to a wow photo. So, can you explain your editing process?
Well, thank you for the kind words, first of all. But so my editing process is not really, I don't think it's that much because I did crop it a little bit, as you can see in the video here. What I did was I cropped it to basically 4 by 5 for Instagram because that way they're not going to crop anything off of it. And so it's only a very slight crop off the top or the bottom. Other than that, I just I usually try to just not really saturate so much, but just give the color a little more vibrancy. So just give more color to it, depending on the image though too. But
Yeah,
for this particular one, and then I wanted to increase the contrast by, you know, making some of the dark areas really like nice and dark and mysterious. And actually, it was actually raining a little bit. That kind of helped saturate the greens a little bit. And you know, just kind of I always call it enhancing, not so
yeah,
much editing, because I make such subtle moves, and I just made sure that the water wasn't overexposed anywhere, like in the white
yeah,
cascades of the water, because I wanted to try to keep all the detail there. And now with slow shutter, you can't shoot raw, so I mean, I had to really make sure I got it right when I shot it. So I probably brought the exposure down just a little bit in slow shutter just to make sure there was no blowouts in the water.
yeah,
And so I'll probably sharpen it just a little bit, maybe give it a little more definition. I think this one was edited in. Did I tell you on my forum where it was edited? It was either the Photos app or it might have been
Polar.
Polar. Okay, I had a
Yeah,
feeling it was Polar.
yeah,
So yeah, so and I might have even hit the auto button in Polar just to get started on it and
yeah,
then adjust from there. That's what I do in photos on the iPhone. I'll hit the that little magic wand and it
yeah,
kind of does what it thinks it needs through AI to make the image the best possible, and then I go from there. But in Polar, I think I just kind of, if I hit the auto button, I would tweak everything as I go, and then um, a lot of times I like to give just a slight vignette on the image, just to kind of take the emphasis off the corners and put the focus and take your eye to the middle of the frame.
yeah,
And I just love this kind of shot, you know, out in
yeah.
the woods and with a river running through it.
Oh, me too.
So yeah, so my editing is like back when I first started using an iPhone, I used to edit stuff with these crazy filters and apps and all this stuff, and I don't know if anybody's really doing that too much anymore. But I try to make mine look like, you know, when you look at it, you're wondering, okay, is that an iPhone shot or is that a Canon or you know what kind of camera took that? And for the trained eye, looking at the water, you could pretty much tell it was a phone. Um, but I just try to make it look as good as I can. And when I see a scene like that, I usually visualize it kind of the way I've got it presented here, with more saturation and or vibrancy and contrast and whatnot.
Yeah, fantastic. And the next photo you sent through was the galactic core of the Milky Way. It's just phenomenal. You can do that on a phone.
Yeah, it's crazy, and I've got Shane Moston to thank for this kind of thing, because I didn't know how to do it until I saw his channel. I tried this with my 10s Max a couple of years ago, and I knew that I wasn't going to get it because the phone just wasn't capable of doing it. And this wasn't you couldn't do this with an iPhone until the 12 and the 12 Pro Max and them came out last year.
Yeah,
And so with night mode, and this is just with night mode, 30 seconds on a tripod, and that's
yeah,
it, done. What you see
yeah.
on the screen now is the unedited version, because there was a plane flying through the at the bottom right hand corner, and so when you see the edited version, it's gone. I took that out with touch retouch.
Yeah. Wow. How did you edit you use Lightroom? What was the process to edit this one?
Yeah, so I tried doing an edit in the Photos app, um, and then it's been a while since I've done a shot like this, so I thought, okay, I'm going back to Shane's channel to see how he did them. So what I did was I went back and watched his quick video on how to do this with an iPhone, and so I took it into Lightroom Mobile, and I don't subscribe to it, so you don't need to have the paid version to do this. You can do this on the free version, and it just does a better job with this kind of with this kind of photo. With the oh gosh, I can't remember all the settings I use here, but I played around with the contrast, the highlights, the shadows, black point, all that stuff. You just have to kind of move those sliders around to see what they do, and then kind of leave them where you think it looks the best. And one of the things that Lightroom Mobile has is dehaze. Uh, Not too many apps have dehaze where
Yeah.
that it works like this, and that really brings out the core, like the galactic core in the Milky Way. And this is just the tip of the core, because as you can see, as you go up into the top left of the frame, it's nothing there because it was all mostly below the horizon. And this was uh, probably one of my better shots of the Milky Way.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was a lot more adjustments and stuff done to get this to look the way it does. But and again, I probably put a little vignette on it just to in the unedited version, you can see there was some light pollution on some trees. Well, I just cropped that up a little bit to actually get rid of that. So
Yeah.
it was fun to play around with.
Nice. Fantastic. And the next one you sent through was a macro.
Yeah. This was shortly after I got the Struman Optics cinematic macro lens, which is just absolutely amazing. I just love this thing. Oh, it's a game changer, and when it comes to macro, that's for sure. So this photo here, there was a bunch of bees actually flying around our Rose of Sharon tree out in the backyard, and I'm just trying to capture them doing their thing. And this one had so much pollen on it that I don't know how he lifted himself off. But the edited version is just strictly cropped, and that's it, because that lens is so clean and clear. I didn't have to do anything to this image at all. And I'll credit that to the iPhone 12 Pro Max too. It has such good exposure latitude that there was no blowouts, there was no dark shadows. It was just a very, very well exposed picture, and it was just shot with halide on in auto, and I was just pointing the phone and shooting these little guys.
Yeah, I love taking photos of bees, just because
Yeah.
because it's because I'm similar to you. I have I love the balance between the technical brain and the challenges, and working within the limitations of the smartphone, and pushing those limitations, and then the creative side of it. And so when I see photos like this, it's like I understand the challenges, and yeah,
Yeah, oh, for sure.
yeah, and you just respect a shot like this, because it's like, wow, that's to get a B mid-flight like that. It maybe it was because it was weighed down, it was a bit slower, because I don't think I've ever seen a B with that much
Yeah.
pollen on it. Yeah.
There
All
were
right.
some that were into the flowers so bad that they were stuck and they had to really try to force themselves to get back out.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, thanks very much, Greg. Is there any advice you would give to somebody who's new to smartphone photography, or even somebody who's transitioning from their big camera to their little cameras? Just some departing advice that you'd give to them.
I would say do shoot as much as you can, because it's digital. If you make an image that you don't want to keep, you can just delete it. There shouldn't be too many issues with storage that way. Gosh, just look on YouTube, listen to podcasts, go to smartphone photography training. That guy's really smart. But I mean, and I've learned quite a bit, just in the one course that I'm working my way through on your website here. I always thought, I don't need a course. I don't need a course.
Yeah,
But yeah, you'd be surprised what you can learn.
yeah,
I don't profess to learn everything or to know everything. I mean, I learn all the time. But on Instagram, I would say go to Instagram and look up a hashtag for, say, whatever phone you're using, and look what other people are doing with that device, and look for inspiration that way, and just just keep shooting, and there's all kinds of stuff online you could find to learn from, and if you can find someone who has a similar device to yours, whether it's online or in person, rub shoulders, get to know them, bounce ideas off of each other. Join a photography club, even if it's a traditional camera club. There's people in the club that I belong to that don't shoot with normal cameras; they shoot with their phones, and but they're
yeah,
still learning stuff, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
I
That
would say there's
community,
all kinds of opportunities out there to learn.
yeah, that
Yeah, the
community.
community aspect, sure, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because you, even if you don't participate, and I mean, you get much more out of it if you participate in a community. But being in a community where you're inspired by other people, you just, by osmosis. I know it's the wrong term, but but you just take stuff in and you learn just by doing those photo challenges and that sort of thing. Yeah, yeah. For your time.
One quick little
Yeah,
just one
please.
quick little tip is, when I first started using my iPhone to take pictures, I challenged myself to do a picture a year for the whole year. So in 2012, I took a photo a day. I took it, edited, and posted on Instagram a photo a day for 366 days because it was a leap year. Duh. But but I tell you, it not only challenges you, but you learn so much from that over the course of that year. So I would highly recommend everybody try it, even if it's just once. I've done it twice, and I won't do it again because
Oh
it's
my
just too
gosh!
much. But um, I know people who are doing it 3, 4, 5, 6 years running,
Wow.
and their photography is amazing. So don't forget to maybe give that a try.
Yeah. No thanks. I, I, but that's a great tip, because in your book you talked about how you've got over creative slumps and use the plural slumps, because we all do that. We all get stuck, don't we?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much, Greg. Really appreciate your time. For those listening, the in the description below, I'll have a link there to Greg's website, and on there, iPhoneography.ca, and there's a link there to buy me a coffee. So if you've enjoyed listening to Greg's story, and it's a way that you can continue to support Greg that way. So And we all love coffee, don't we, Greg?
You sure do.
So thanks so much for your time, and we'll catch up again soon.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, Mike. It's always a pleasure.
Cheers.